From Marjorie Montgomery, life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and mysteries of this great gift. In that spirit, let us worship. I invite you to rise or sit or whatever you want to do while we sing this opening hymn.
Good morning. This morning I wanted to tell you a little bit about our Church Comes Home family ministries. Those of you who don't have children or youth in the program may not be aware that we regularly send home packages for family faith development at home. It's a bag with activities for children and youth and an accompanying envelope. The bag's activities are things that are intended to be picked up and used right away with very little direction from an adult. They're engaging at the age level of the child that they're delivered to. And then the envelope, which looks like this, always has in it information for parents to do deeper engagement. And there's a fair number of papers there. Some people engage with all of it. I think some people skim it. It's there for people to use what they can use and come back to it a later time if they choose to. There's also always a sign that can go in the window or up on the refrigerator to help remember what the month's theme is. This month's theme is play. Play is a spiritual practice. Now, most of the time when we say spiritual practice, people think it's something hard or onerous or difficult or time-consuming. And spiritual practices don't have to be hard. They can be anything that engages your heart and your soul, opens you up to a fresh way of looking at the world, or brings you into deeper connection with the world or with the people that you love. Play as a spiritual practice, it expands new ideas. It's social, it connects people. It helps with emotional regulation. It helps us make meaning of our lives, can help us integrate new information and ideas. And those things are just as true for adults as they are for children, although our play tends to look different. So this month in the bags, the activities were some age-appropriate combination of jokes, puzzles, balls, chalk, fairy house makings, puzzle games, and the ideas that were suggested were a family talent show with everyone bringing their favorite jokes. A play break, outside or inside. Playing games. There were games included and some other ideas. Laughter yoga. Rainbow activities, chalking chalk messages for pride. A rainbow meditation to help one be in focus with what it might feel like to be a rainbow floating through the sky. And then there are the holy listening questions. Several months ago, we sent home holy listening stones, which is a way of deeper engaging with emotions and thoughts and telling stories and letting them go into the universe as they need to go. And every month I've been adding questions. This month, tell about a time you felt really good about being yourself, or a time you felt shy or unsure. Tell about a time you told a funny story. How did it feel to laugh? Play really is a spiritual practice. As Louis Armstrong said, what we play is life.
So welcome to the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. My name is Nathan. I'm your senior minister. We are now trying to stream this onto a bunch of places, YouTube and Facebook. So we've dispersed the staff to all of the media that we are streaming from. Glad you're with us. If you're a visitor, we are especially glad that you are here. You want to find out more about this church, go to our website. You can get on our email list. That's how to get more connected. Today's a special day because we have a guest preacher, whatever guest preacher means in these pandemic times. Well, it means we can get someone really good to come in from far away without them having to come here. So we have the Reverend Allison Miller. She's the senior minister at Morristown Unitarian Fellowship in New Jersey. She was actually one of the candidates for the UUA president and came and visited our church when she was running. We're really lucky that I tricked her into preaching this Sunday, but she's here with us, and she even typed into the chat if you're over on YouTube. So glad you were with us today. Also, some of the things you need to know about our building kind of reopening plan. We're going to have more announcements soon, but just the quick things. Today if you're watching this recorded, I don't know when it is, but if you're watching this live or at any point on Sunday, today from 5 to 8, you can come into the building, take a stone, place it in the chalice bowl, just so that we have a chance to come in, maybe offer a blessing for the building, just a chance for you to be in your church, just for a few minutes. We'll have you go in one at a time, masks on. And then June 13th, we're going to start having bite-sized services. You have to RSVP on the website, and RSVP as the unit you are coming with, the family unit you're coming with, so that we know how many pods to make available. We're going to cap the services at 80. Glad you're with us. Welcome to our church. This is it. This is the last Sunday before we have services in person. How are you feeling? Honestly, I'm feeling a little anxious. Here's why. It's really hard to restart a church after 15 months of being we've been doing so much church, just not church where we can be in person. It's really hard to restart in-person church after 15 months. So here are some of the things you need to know. We had a choice in this congregation where we could either do full-blown in-person services where we required vaccines for people to have access, or we could do the shorter services that are distanced with people spread out while we still prioritize online while children do not have access to the vaccine, and we chose that one because we think worship should be open to everyone. I know it may feel like to some of us that the pandemic is over. If you go out in the world right now, it certainly seems like people think it's over. But remember, we're not even at 40% vaccinated. Our numbers right now are low, but they were low last June. July and August is when people start, closing up indoors because the weather's too hot. So some epidemiologists said they wouldn't be surprised if there's another spike. So we are doing these services, we are prioritizing right now online with the option for you to come in person. We will continue to prioritize online until one of four criteria are met. Some of four criteria are met. The case numbers are lower, the vaccination percentages are higher, children have access to the vaccine, and or this church gets more comfortable and more practiced worshiping in person. We know that families are having a hard time with this, so we are still prioritizing giving families access to church in different ways. We're sending home the Church Comes Home packets every week. Not every week. Periodically. I think it's every month. And we're still going to prioritize online. So what you should know when you come to experience this: 9 o'clock, 11:30. Those are the two service times. We will start the pre-service playing in here. We ask you to wear a mask because we're not requiring vaccines to come in here. So we ask everyone to wear a mask during the service and to not sing. We ask you to RSVP on the website. It's a really cool, easy system, but we do that so we can contact trace if there is an outbreak, and so we can make sure we keep it under 80 people per service. So RSVP on the website. When it's service time, come on up. There will be an usher all the ushers have told us that they are vaccinated. The usher will do a temperature check, and then you will be brought to one of these pods. As you can see, we've roped them off so that there's various spaces. We can actually fit 120 in these pods. So if you are a person of 1 or 2, do not worry. We have pods of 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. We are lumping you based on who your, exposure family is. So it's not just, you don't all have to sit exactly 6 feet apart. Sit in your sort of clumps. We couldn't figure out how to do the stones. We know that fomite transmission is not the big way this is transmitted. Actually, the bigger risk is when people stand in the line for the stones. But even still, having the one box where everyone reaches in, we thought maybe a little concern. So I don't know if you can see it. We put all the stones on a table, so when you come up to do the stones, you'll just take them spread out. We're going to do the offering the same way we normally do. The ushers using the bursars. It's kind of a far reach. And then what we're going to do at the end of the service, so remember, these 20 to 30-minute services do not have all of the content these bite-sized services don't have all of the content that you've come to expect from the full service, which you get online. At some point, we'll switch it, not yet. But when the service ends, we'll ask you to go outside and then do whatever interactions with people you want to do. So remember, we're asking you to let us take this slowly. We're doing one thing at a time. And the very first thing is worship. Once we get worship figured out, we'll figure out what's next. Branches, coffee hour, classes, committee meetings, cottage meetings for the assistant minister search. There's a whole bunch of things we could do. But right now, let's just practice getting worship first. And going back out into the world is scary. It is. It's okay if you don't feel ready. It's okay if you want to try and you can't make it. You can sit outside if you want. We want everyone to be safe, and we want people to feel comfortable. And it's hard to have 15 months of people telling you there's an invisible thing out there that could kill you at any point, unless you wear a mask and do all of these other things. Some of us are ready to shed that, some of us are not. It takes a long time to adjust to that fear. So we're going to do this slow and safe for all those who need it.
It was a perfect square. It had 4 matching corners and 4 equal sides, and it was perfectly happy. But on Monday, the square was cut into pieces and poked full of holes, and it wasn't perfectly square anymore. So it made itself into a fountain that babbled and giggled and clapped. On Tuesday, the square was torn into scraps, so it made itself into a garden. On Wednesday, the square was shredded in strips, so it made itself into a park. On Thursday, the square was shattered, so it made itself into a bridge. On Friday, the square was snipped into ribbons. So it made itself into a river. On Saturday, the square was crumpled and ripped and wrinkled. So it made itself into a mountain. On Sunday, the square waited to see what was next. It waited and waited. Nothing happened. Its 4 equal sides were confining. Its 4 matching corners were rigid and cramped. So it made itself into a window that looked out on a mountain, that gave birth to a river that was crossed by a bridge, that led to a park, that was home to a garden, that had at its center a fountain that babbled and giggled and clapped.
We have 2 stones that we're going to place today. Both are for deaths. One is for the death of a grandmother of a member, Christina St. George. Her grandmother, Lucy Curry, died this week. And we found out earlier this week of the death of a church member, Jim Nichols, who had been in hospice for a while. There will be a service for him at a later date. When we have those details, we'll share them with you. We've been in contact with his family. We'll miss him. This is a ritual that is open to everyone in this church, virtually. Type your stone into the chat on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're watching this. I will place stones for you in absentia. I invite you to come forward now as we place stones. And we say together, with hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love.
Before I begin my sermon, I just want to take a minute to say thank you to Reverend Nathan Ryan and to all of you for welcoming me into your sanctuary. I frequently begin services with my folks by affirming, "It is good to be. It is good to be here. It is good to be here together." Those words have felt especially true in this time of a pandemic. And while I have missed being in the same room with people on a Sunday morning, I have grown to appreciate the ways we are able to come together across distance through technology. It feels fitting to be together today, you in Baton Rouge and me in New Jersey, especially in this time of surviving and now emerging from a pandemic. which impacts all of us throughout the nation and the globe. I'm also grateful to have visited your city and sanctuary before and hope to visit in the flesh again sometime soon. For today, though, let me say, it is so good to be here virtually together. When faced with a time of great upheaval and change, mounting losses and grief, a disciple asked his teacher, "How can we find happiness in a world where nothing is permanent and everything and everyone we love could be gone at any moment?" The teacher said, "You see this glass? For me, it is already broken. I enjoy it, this vessel which carries water to my lips and quenches my thirst. If I tap it, it makes a lovely ring. When I look at it, sometimes I can see the sun reflected off of it, making beautiful patterns. One day, when it is perched on a table and knocked over by my elbow or someone else's or the wind, it will fall to the ground and shatter. Then I will say, of course, I understand. The glass was already broken." I honor the truth in that Buddhist tale. We are all like glass. Our bodies are finite and fragile. From the moment we are born, we are fated to die, whether from a virus or other illness or simply old age. Acceptance of this can lead to the joy of awareness as to the preciousness of each day, of each hour. However, at other times, we are called to collect the shards of glass, to gather them up, and to strive to make what is broken whole again. This feels especially vital to assert now, as we just passed the anniversary of George Floyd's death through cruel and callous punishment on the streets of Minneapolis. George cried out a final lament, "I can't breathe." And he cried out for his mama with his last breath. George was taken from his mother and children too soon, which can never be undone. But his last words are a call to all of us, his siblings and cousins in the human family, to resistance and to repair. A year ago, throughout the summer of 2020, 26 million people across the United States heard that call and took part in demonstrations, civil disobedience, vigils, and teach-ins, which added up to the largest protests in U.S. history. We are all called to mend the brokenness and address and redress the havoc that racism and white supremacy wreak in our communities, and on Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color in particular, as well as trans people, people with disabilities, and people with intersecting marginalized identities. We are called to ask, whose elbow or knee is it that is repeatedly breaking what is whole, even if impermanent, holy, even if imperfect, and someone's beloved? In the Jewish mystical tradition of Kabbalah, there is a guiding story we might turn to for inspiration. In the beginning, there was only a wholeness we name God. Then God breathed in and withdrew to make room for something else. The first thing that was created was light, a brilliant, primordial light. God filled vessels with the holy light and sent them to the world. However, the light was so powerful that the vessels shattered. A different Big Bang, sending shards and sparks across the universe and across our world. some of the divine light became trapped in the shards. According to this story, humans were created with the purpose of finding the shards, collecting what is broken, and piecing back together the divine sparks within us, among us, and all around us in everything. This concept is called tikkun olam in Hebrew, often translated as repairing the world.
I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul.
Our reading comes from the book To Heal a Fractured World by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. There is a story of a rabbi who was once so intent on his studies that he failed to hear the cry of his baby son. His father, also a rabbi, heard and went down and took the baby in his arms until he went to sleep again. Then he went into his son, still intent on his books, and said, "My son, I do not know what you are studying, but it is not the study of Torah if it makes you deaf to the cry of a child. To live the life of faith is to hear the silent cry of the afflicted, the lonely, and marginal, the poor, the sick, and the disempowered, and to respond. For the world is not yet mended, and there is work still to do, and God has empowered us to do it."
I'll invite us into a moment of prayer and reflection. That great unnamed mystery, God, that we know when we see love and kindness, be with us on this day. And help us listen. Listen for the suffering of others. Listen for the suffering in ourselves. Help us listen to the feelings of failure and despair and hopelessness. Help us to trust that acknowledging these things, acknowledging our brokenness, can lead us to healing, can lead us to make a more loving world. Help us hold in our hearts all that we've lost, so that we may build the world we've always dreamed of. Amen.
But the Hebrew word tikkun also has the meaning of improve. The work is not simply to put things back the way they were. That was a context that led to brokenness. It is about the imagination and the courage to create something new, something more resilient that better reflects and frees that divine light. As in the story for all ages of a square that once seemed perfect and whole, but actually had the seeds and the sparks within for something more beautiful and diverse in color, arrangement, and shape. At first, that poor square went through a lot. It was cut, poked, torn, shredded, shattered, snipped, crumpled, and wrinkled. It would be understandable if it just wanted to be a square again, if it was too tired and chose to move towards that familiar shape. But the square didn't. It made use of its broken open form to practice becoming something else and something new. Finally, when it became a square again, it became a window, shining a light on all the varied possibilities waiting to take shape in the world. Many of us, over a year into the coronavirus pandemic, we may be feeling torn apart and tired. We may long to go back to what was normal and familiar. But that was a form, physical and emotional and spiritual, that was far from perfect. Before we rush to regather as we reach a safe point of immunity from the vaccines, we would be wise to remember the lessons of this time of distance and physical separation. In some ways, we are closer than we were before, emotionally and spiritually. We've been through a collective trauma and worked together on our collective resilience. It is no accident that the Black Lives Matter movement, which is not new, caught on in the mainstream during this time. On one hand, George Floyd's and Breonna Taylor's and Ahmaud Arbery's deaths are appalling. But there have been many appalling cases of brutality before. I think that in being broken open by suffering, many more people of privilege were jolted out of a slumbering sense that everything is okay. It isn't. It wasn't. We will all rise together or perish as fools, as Dr. King said. The further breakdown of the shards of society built on white supremacy, extreme nationalism, exploitation of the earth, and unfettered capitalism have revealed how fragile and flawed our healthcare, housing, education, economic, and criminal justice systems are, and just how few in number they serve. They are broken. Let's fix them, but let's do that in new ways too. In that story from Kabbalah, the most creative, all-powerful force moves out of the way and doesn't take up all the air to make room for something new. Let that be a part of what fixing means and part of our new practice. Let us imagine all of us, especially those of us with privilege, learning how to be made in that image of the divine, reminding us that part of the work of creation is moving to the side and not taking up all the air in order to center the voices, the light, the visions that were once relegated to the side or the outside. So often in our Unitarian Universalist communities and the wider world in which we live, it is people on the margins who have noticed the jagged, broken shards for the longest and been impacted by them the most. A number of them are the activists, the artists, the survivors with tested wisdom as to how to practice new, more resilient, more holistic, more whole ways of being and becoming.
All right. You probably don't have your wallets on you because you're at your house or somewhere else. So I'll give you a second to go get them. This is the offering part. Do you got them yet? Yeah, it's probably far away. Like you probably have it by the front door or something. I'll wait. All right, so here's the deal. You all have told us over the last 15 months, through your actions, that you love this church and you are willing to pledge very generously to this church, one of the best pledge drives we've ever had. But you are not as willing to give to the offering as you would in person. And I don't mean that in like a shame way. I mean that in a like, that's just the personality that we have. For some reason, there's something about having the bursar go past you where you can put money in, you know, cash or a check that is easier because while some of you have been generous, we just haven't had the numbers that we usually have for offerings. So here's your opportunity. This is the last chance you have to give to an offering where there won't also be a live option. So let's go ahead and say this will be the offering that the most people in the history of the world had ever given to the Baton Rouge Church that was virtual. This is it. Whatever the number you were thinking, move the decimal a little more, but in the good way so we get more money. No matter what, I'm just excited we get to see y'all next week, or tonight. Anyway, the offering will now be generously given and received.
let me share a story on that topic from Morris County, New Jersey, about how in this time of physical distance, we are finding ourselves more together than before in moving the work of repair, reimagination, and co-creating something new. The physical separation of the pandemic meant that our congregation and others like it were cut off from some of the ways that we are accustomed to embodying our values of justice, equity, and compassion, our second principle. We could no longer volunteer inside of soup kitchens or advocate inside the State House or mentor in after-school programs, or in many places we gather with our neighbors to alleviate suffering. We decided to use the disruption of the pandemic to pay attention to which groups of people were impacted disproportionately. We also practiced new ways of being and organizing. We were already in the process of forming a new multi-faith, nonpartisan coalition called Morris Area Together. You may resonate somewhat with this story. I believe you already have a coalition called Together Baton Rouge. Now, the pandemic could have disrupted our organizing this new organization, but we decided to leverage new ways of meeting. In the virtual context, we found that it was easier to meet with neighbors throughout our county of 500,000 people, and not just our neighbors in Morristown. In fact, we are now beginning to organize statewide under the banner of New Jersey Together. We interviewed thousands of people in our multiracial, multi-faith, economically diverse county and uncovered what were the pressing needs of now. We centered the voices of the Black community and immigrants, including people who are undocumented, and 3 needs surfaced. Affordable housing was made even more challenging during this pandemic, and many are facing eviction. Mental health and addiction are on the rise, and one issue that surfaced that was so clearly an issue before the pandemic was the racial disparities in mass incarceration. We studied what was happening in our county, and not just about the actions of Morristown's police force, and discovered that African Americans were incarcerated at rates of 23.5 times that of white residents in Morris County, New Jersey. 23.5 times. By the way, that statistic is the worst in the nation. A broken system that discards precious Black lives and leaves their families to also struggle disproportionately. We discovered the prosecutor's office and uneven charging and sentencing practices were a major factor. We raised awareness through social media campaigns. We wrote and called our representatives. We organized a statewide New Jersey Together Zoom call, the first one, with thousands who joined. We were interviewed on television and shared stories of our communities. When the Morris County prosecutor resigned his office, the day after 3 of us wrote a condemning article for the newspaper, he said, I quote, "I just want to say I didn't resign because of New Jersey Together." That was the best endorsement of our work. And more importantly, we are already meeting with the new prosecutor and holding him accountable to be a part of change. Black churches, and specifically formerly incarcerated leaders, are major voices at these Zoom tables. Elected and appointed officials are showing up because we are demonstrating an ability to mobilize people and power. But this is a table where the civic voice, the people's voices who are most impacted, are centered. The most recent Zoom table was organized by the Morris Area Chapter of New Jersey Together last month, And we had over 700 screens at our public launch. We held conversations on that call with the mayor of Morristown and his primary opponent in the upcoming elections about getting back into right and legal relations around affordable housing. With the prosecutor about next steps to reduce racial disparities in criminal justice, and with a CEO of a major transportation company about solving problems around timely rides to mental health appointments. We were not afraid to turn up the heat and hold these leaders accountable, and we're just getting started. There, at those Zoom tables where we have practiced being together while apart, I have witnessed a spirit of collective liberation on the move. Call it the work of Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. Call it the work of building the beloved community, or creating the kingdom of heaven on earth. Whatever you call it, it is our shared purpose. May we be the authors and artists, the organizers, the researchers, the teachers, the students, the hosts and guests at a welcome table where when things break, we repair them in ways that release and free the divine sparks in all. May it be so. And now, in our going, may the light of love bless us and keep us. May it shine down upon us and radiate out from within us. May it be gracious unto us and grow our commitments to liberation. For this is the day and the life that we are given. So let us plant seeds of hope and healing, joy and justice in it.
And go in peace. Go in love. See you tonight. See you next week. See you online. Amen.